Who's talking back there? I hear somebody talking.
Oh,
is that somebody's Lenovo rep? Because
probably my kid.
We have lots of questions for them. Hey, yo, welcome back. Yokoso. I hope you are all having a wonderful evening tonight, an even better one than the wild speculations that we're going to have. Sorry, there's no dance off that starts this episode tonight, unless midstream Clef decides to take over. So on that note, we're talking about some wild speculations for the Legion Go 2, and I'm joined by my awesome panelists. Introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, Clef, Game TikTok.
Hey, it's Hans' turn. How's it going, everybody?
All right. That was nicely done. You've been practicing that, evidently. So I want to talk to you guys about what we actually know about the Legion Go 2. And this is coming off the back of our recent Speedcast episode of, some of the leaks that we've been reporting on, and basically everyone is salivating over. But I want to temper everyone's expectations here a little bit, because there's actually a lot that we don't know. So, despite the fact that in Handhelds United, I am the resident Legion Go and Lenovo shill, I also need to, take a breath and make sure that my hopes are not set too high. So with that, let's talk about, short of the leaks and what we actually got to see. And in particular, Clef got hands-on with it at CES. What is confirmed? Clef?
It's hard to say, and I'm probably gonna have like a massive, huge Eiffel Tower tinfoil hat tonight, because I'm gonna throw a lot of allegedly into this episode. Now, yes, there were things confirmed, and as far as I can recall, when we were back at CES, what was confirmed was that we were gonna have a Legion Go S Steam Edition. That was there on the floor. We could play with it. We could, bring up Steam and everything. There was a Windows variant, and these two devices, as we know, are out and about. And then there was a third one, which was the Go 2. There was never a question of having different SKUs. There was never a question of having different configuration. It was always just a Legion Go 2. And essentially the two main things that we had, well, other than like the hardware, the physical stuff, the ergonomics that changed. One thing that was also confirmed was that it was going to be the Z2E chip, and that it was going to be an OLED panel that was 144 hertz, 1920 by 1200, VRR and landscape. That was like the main key takeaway. And they had this whole promotion. I have that cowboy hat at home. They had this whole promotion with the cowboys, and I don't know if you guys remember that. That was it. We haven't heard anything since. And when I say I want to go into like super wild territory, is I can't help but draw the situation that we've seen about a year or 2 years ago, where Taki Udon, another very prominent YouTube creator, had covered what essentially was the G-Cloud under the Lenovo brand. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was like fully branded Lenovo. It was essentially the exact same thing. And for some reason, some engineering simple was out in the wild, and Taki Udon got to buy one and just like went over it left, right, and center, and just pretty much confirmed that it was a G-Cloud that was branded Lenovo. So what's happening here? What's happening with the Go 2? Like, are we going to get one? Are we really going to have a Z2, a Z2E? Like, I don't know what to think anymore. I just don't.
Yeah, that's some fair points that you've both confirmed for us, and also wildly speculated about, which we did promise in the intro. So what about you, Hanstern? What do you know or don't know that you think is worth investigating and, worth tempering for expectations?
I'm just as confused as everybody else. Like, it's hard to tell what's been confirmed and what's just speculated. Like, I can make a lot of assumptions, based off like the Go S, like you're probably going to get the same size screen that we got last time. You're probably going to get a bigger battery. The grips are going to be better. It's probably going to have a Z2E. You're probably going to get 32 gigs of RAM, because you got a 32 gig option on the Go S. But, I could say probably all of these things, but until it happens, it's your guess is as good as mine.
Those are great points too. And I think on that note, what do you think is important for, potential buyers to temper their expectations of? Like, what should, Clef kind of touched upon this about like the two different SKUs, but like, what do you think is something that we should be really, worried about, or maybe not necessarily worried or concerned, but just don't necessarily be surprised if like it turns out this certain way or doesn't turn out a certain way?
So, if I may, one thing I think buyers should definitely be wary of, or at least manage expectations for, is nothing is set in stone when it comes to how many SKUs we'll have, if even we'll have more than one SKU. And I think as much as Lenovo has managed to sink its teeth in the PC handheld market long enough, at least, so that people are excited for their second option, I still think that they haven't done as well as ASUS to warrant having multiple SKUs. Like from a logistic perspective, from a bottom line perspective, having multiple SKUs can be hurtful and, dare I say, dangerous. Let's not forget that Legion, banner, Lenovo canceled their cell phones a couple of years back. Like, they've been through that route of trying to tap into a market and not succeed and just step out of it. And I don't think it will be the right move for Lenovo to have multiple SKUs, in my personal opinion. But back to the leaks and what we've seen, for example, one of the videos from Billy that I've seen is the guy claims he has his head 2E. And when he goes into Device Manager, it says it's an 8090M chip. But then when he goes into BIOS, it says it's an 880M, which would be more in line with a Z2, which would be more in line with an HX365, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, one Xplayer, when they launched the F1 Pro, they had a variant HX365. And that chip, that GPU was essentially a 780 rebranded 880. So that would fall in line with some of the leaks that we have in terms of performance when we look at the numbers from so-called Z2E that seems to be just uncomfortably close to the Z1E. Anyways, I went on a tangent here, but yeah, I would want people to exercise caution because nothing is set in stone yet, in my opinion.
I think that's very fair points that you made. If I'm not mistaken, I think the 365 has an 860M. We'll have to check that in post. But the 860M, to your point, is very close to a 780M, if not basically looking like a rebadged Z1 Extreme, essentially. So it's very important that, yeah, we do consider that, we're not necessarily going to get this big performance leap that we were kind of hoping for with the HX370. And whether or not that boils directly down to the graphics processor, or it's because, of the loss of cores and threads that we've talked about, we don't, realistically know at this point in time, but it is, important to think about. And how do you think that would affect like your purchase or lack of purchase, Zach? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, my opinion is, like, it's not, it's still not the amazing leap in performance that, you're going to want, I guess. I mean, we can speculate all these little odds and ends and, quality of life improvements, but, like, we have enough data from 7840Us, 8840Us, HX370s to know that this is just a bump. It's another bump. It's another bump. Valve's still chilling like way behind that, and they still haven't even, we're still waiting on Gabe, to, hey, where's this big leap? You know what I mean? So, like, there's no.
Wait a minute though. Wait a minute though, Zach. You said we're waiting for the big leak. I mean, our guy Joe says Steam Deck 2 is already here, man. Like, so it's whatever you want it to be. We're going to have to have
whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, we're going to have him back on so that he can properly defend his position against Clef. Otherwise, he's just going to get, snide remarks. All right, so for my next question that I have here, we promised wild speculation. Why is it that the most recent thing that we actually have is a report that essentially suggests that a Legion Go 2 is supposed to be coming in September? But, we're August, probably by the time this goes live, and they're, Lenovo's been pretty hush-hush about it. And I would expect, they could very much shadow drop it similarly to what ASUS had done with the original Ally. But why is it you think that we don't even have specs confirmation?
Oh, may I?
Of course.
Well, there's a couple of things, and that will kind of tie in with the previous question, where I would want people to understand that, as far as I'm concerned, if there's one thing that I believe Lenovo should do for you, for me, for us, is to say something. But if they haven't, there might be an explanation, and maybe it is the fact that if we look at performance in terms of sales by, just using GPD, INEO, 1X Player as a sort of what's the word? Like just the overall market and trying to understand where the trend is going, it seems that we're seeing less sales in terms of numbers versus what we had with the previous APUs. And if the Z2E, and that's where it's going to get wild, if the Z2E and Z2E AI are supposed to be binned versions of the HX370, where it would be logical that this is exactly what it was with the Z1E, well, if that's what the issue is, that would explain why it took so long for ASUS to come up with the Xbox Ally X. It would also explain why it's taking this long for Lenovo to do anything outside of these other chips that were in the Go S, because right now it's like the Go 2 had such a momentum, and still you go on videos, you go on Discord, you go on Reddit, people are clamoring at the doors of Lenovo to get more information, and yet we're not hearing nothing. So maybe they're struggling to have the chips to make those devices. And if truly they do, I kind of want to go back to the point of why would you want to have multiple SKUs? On the Legion Go S, it made sense. It made sense because clearly they don't seem to have that issue. They have the chips ready. They have the hardware. They want to give an incentive for potential buyers to, have a new momentum of interest by introducing SteamOS to the device. But we all know that you can do it with the one that was available a couple of weeks prior. I don't see them doing that with the Legion Go 2, because right now I feel like it's not by choice that we don't have a SKU. It's because they can't. Not at this point in time. There's a lot of partners involved to bring a device like this to market, and it seems like there's a crossroad that they need to get past, and I would bet that they haven't managed to do that at the time being.
I think you've said a lot there that we can unpack for sure, and I definitely have thoughts on that. But Zach, do you have something to add to that?
I have. I mostly agree, with what Clef's saying, but I guess to add to it, the Claw AI 8, whatever, if that's the right name for the AMD one, supposedly is launched, but where is it? So, that definitely leads to the whole, nobody's getting chips. So, you can say it's launched, like MSI, but you still can't find it. So is it, tree falls in the forest, but doesn't make a sound if no one's around to hear it. So
yeah,
I think that's the train of thought definitely tracks.
I think that's a really great example that you gave. In both cases here, I think compared to the original MSI Claw, if we're looking at the MSI Claw AI 8, the Intel variant, and also the MSI Claw A8 in particular, these are, you could probably argue that these are both paper launches. People have them, people seemingly have them, but it's, it looks like you could count the number of people that actually own it on your hand. You know what I mean? So I think it does lend to the idea that Clef was talking about, that it's not really a decision that they're making. They're not giving the information, or they're not presenting us with more because they literally can't, like their hands are tied. And, the wild speculation on my part, which, I was mentioning to our awesome panel here before the show, was I have wild speculation wild theories, which are that Lenovo, as much as I love them, I don't think they're a favored partner of AMD. Because it seems like they don't necessarily, if you look at their product stack of their other products, so, like their ThinkBook, their ThinkPad lineup, you look at their Legion lineups, they don't have a lot of Ryzen products, right? Now, granted, they do have Legion laptops, which have like an AMD variant to an Intel variant, as in like the NVIDIA GPU in there will be the same. But if you look historically, at least as far as I know, they've never made like Radeon GPUs, right? They've never sold products with Radeon GPUs in them. They're either an NVIDIA GPU for a dedicated GPU, whether that's a desktop or a laptop, or it's just got the integrated graphics inside, right? And if you look at the competitors, particularly ASUS, which we've been talking about, ASUS, they have in the past made plenty of Radeon GPUs, not recently, but they have. And they also have, lots of, and they also have, products in their laptop lineup, which has Ryzen APUs in there too. So it seems like maybe that AMD and ASUS have like a stronger partnership, maybe because ASUS is willing to spend more money on that partnership, similar to like what NVIDIA has done with their favorite partners. And so like if we're looking at it at that angle, it kind of falls in line as to why, Lenovo isn't able to get these chips. And again, this is, there's no evidence to actually prove this, or at least we don't have any, but it would kind of make sense, right?
Well, there's something I'd like to add to that is if we are putting ourselves in the perspective of being AMD, it would make sense, despite, the product stack that each companies have, it would make sense that they would work more closely with the company that is more likely to sell more chips so that they can keep on producing them and ultimately keep on making profit. And when we look at just Lenovo, or we look at ASUS and we look at MSI, anyone that pays attention to these companies can easily tell which of those three companies is not as active in just the gaming peripheral in general. Lenovo is way more geared towards like workstations, work laptops, these types of things. Now, of course, they have the Legion tablets, which are probably their most prominent gaming-centric SKU that they have in their entire lineup. The Go managed to sink its teeth on the market, but I don't think it was a financial success yet. Whereas ASUS with the ROG Ally and ROG Ally X, no questions. MSI, probably not with the Claw, but it wasn't with Intel anyways. But when it comes to just gaming peripherals in general, they are in the market. They are present with motherboards, with GPUs, like you mentioned. So, I feel like it's just logical that Lenovo would probably be third in that kind of relationship if we are to compare those three giants.
I think something that you mentioned earlier too, which is a great point about like the Legion Go S, can't actually be looked at as like an exception, because those are not new chips, right? Like the Z2 Go is technically a new chip, but it's not new silicon. Like it's older. It's an older architecture. So because they're not new, like, they're not the new hotness like the Z2 lineup is, as you said, it makes sense for AMD, however, people may not like it, but it just makes sense if that's the person that sells most of your product that you're going to give, your newest and hottest products to. Right. Yep. And I know there's probably some people out there also speculating, like, well, what about like, these Chinese companies? What about like 1X Player and GPD and INEO and stuff like that? But Clef, you had a really interesting thought about how they've approached things, right? And how they make their products work. Would you mind like sharing that?
Of course. So we're talking about the HX370 in general,
yes,
right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, they have to go mainline chip, and mainline chips are going to be more expensive. And of course, that cost will translate into the bottom price that the consumer is going to have to pay. And as we know, we can get behind the fact that, they're boutique and they don't sell software, which all of these things are true. But ultimately, it's very likely that they have to pay AMD more than what ASUS or Lenovo would pay for a Z1 Extreme versus what was, say, a 7840U and 8840U. And if we look at drivers, and I think that all falls into places, the way that ASUS and Lenovo were not getting mainline drivers, but the mainline chips were, to me speaks to a relationship that probably happens behind closed doors, where they probably had a negotiation with ASUS and Lenovo to say, because, they're big companies, they're going to buy in massive amounts. So they probably negotiate prices. ASUS is trying to bring it down, AMD is trying to keep it up. So I would feel like the middle ground was like, okay, we're going to go lower cost, but you're going to have to pay us to have a driver update. I think that's what happened, and I think that's what you wanted me to get into. Just to
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, and that was exactly the point that I wanted to share. So thank you for that. Yeah, there's
absolutely.
we obviously don't have any hard evidence, and we probably never will. But I think it does fall in line, logically speaking, from business practices, as far as we all understand, I would say.
Well, if I may just push that idea even further, I think Valve got the exact same deal. That's exactly what Valve did with the Steam Deck. The one difference is Valve was able to rely on the translation layer, where they can probably inject newer driver API without AMD being able to do anything about it, because it's all happening within the translation layers. So I think that's how Valve got such a crazy prices on Steam and the Steam Deck and Steam Deck OLED. But anyways, just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So before we wrap up this episode, I do want to talk about, since we've been talking about speculations and tempering expectations, if in a worst case scenario, let's pretend worst case scenario, the Go 2 comes out, and in fact, it only has a Z2 chip in there. It does not have a Z2 Extreme, which, as we were talking about earlier, is more or less a rebadged Z1 Extreme. Okay.
Well,
But based on this, we would also assume that the price is not going to be that much different. What, if anything, do you think would compel someone to buy this new Go 2, or is it dead in the water? What do you think? What do you think, Zach?
I mean, if it is basically a Z2 Go, whatever, and it's basically just the Legion Go, I guess, X, because we never got one of those. I mean, it's still going to be better. So, I mean, if price is right, I mean, you're obviously not going to upgrade. I mean, unless you just really want to, for whatever reason, maybe you can sell your old one, get a new one, whatever, and it's worth it to you. From my standpoint, no, it would be from nothing. If you have nothing, Legion Go is, I think it's still sitting at MSRP right now, but even on sale. And if a Go 2 that's basically even on the spec sheet is the same price or lower, then obviously just buy that. But outside of that, why would you if you already have something?
What do you think, Clef?
Well, so if we think of the Legion Go S as sort of being a rebranded 6800U, right? And if we were to have the Z2, as you said, and which ultimately would kind of be a Z1X, or let's say an 8840U rebranded, then that would mean that Lenovo, which arguably, if you are pushing high TDP, the gap that you're losing versus HX370 is not as, you don't feel it as much as opposed to being in lower TDPs. But you still have things like OLED. You still have things like 144 hertz, better ergonomics, the landscape orientation to lean on. But if truly that's what happens, that means that at least for me, that takes time analyzing these things. Lenovo will have literally taken their decks of cards and thrown it on the table for me to see. Because if that's what happens, and the prices that are being leaked are truly $1,100, $1,200, that means that they're just taking older, rebranded chips and trying to make a profit because they did not successfully do so with the Legion Go. That's got to be what it is. So they're throwing more things into the mix. 32 gigabytes of RAM, OLED, it's appealing, but let's not kid ourselves. You have people, okay, open box, whatever. You have people that were buying Legion Goes for $500 not too long ago, and we would have another upgraded device that truly wouldn't really be that much of an upgrade in numbers for more than double the price. Yeah, if that's what happens, Lenovo, I was dancing for ASUS. I'm not dancing for, well, maybe I am. But one thing for sure, I see through your game. If that's what's happening, I can see through you. And I don't blame you. That's the name of the game. It's a business. Business has to make money. It just adds up. But it's going to be very clear as water, if that's what happens.
That's a really good analysis that you're making there. And the reason why I gave that example is because I think that in that scenario, it becomes a sort of Steam Deck LCD, Steam Deck OLED type of situation where someone who has a Steam Deck LCD it's kind of a hard sell to buy a Steam Deck OLED, even though Steam Deck OLED is basically an improvement in every way, right? So as Zach was saying, if you already have a Go, it's not something that you would upgrade from, unless you were willing to sell it and then to jump through hoops to go and get that done. Now, I think it's pretty obvious to say that if it does boil down to being that, like, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people for sure, and in our audience included.
Just one last thing, because you said it and you're right. If we were to have a go-to at the same introduction price that the Go was, then you know what? I get it. It's fine. I was wrong. People will want to buy it because they have the improved panel, slightly improved APU, maybe mainline drivers, if truly that will be the case. I could see a benefit there, but we'll see when we cross that bridge. I don't think we will. Anyways,
no. Just jumping on that real quick of that what you said. If I'm not mistaken, the original Go released at $750 and $799. If this thing came out at $750 and $799, I actually think that might be a compelling purchase for some people. Well, even though, okay, at 11 or 1200, that's pushing it a little bit too much. I agree, but yeah, 750 is 750, 800. Still people are going to be disappointed because they wanted that extra hit of performance. But to your point,
if we were to get that at 800, you still retain the detachable controllers. You have 80 watt-hour battery now. Let's not forget that. 32 gigabyte, if truly that is the case. You have better buttons, hair trigger. You have OLED landscape panel. Like, if truly they can pull that off at $799, yes, please sign me up.
Well, there you go. So before we, finally, there is one more thing that I'd like to throw in the mix that actually it just occurred to me while we were recording here. Maybe one reason that we're not actually hearing anything from Lenovo or any kind of whispers or chatters at all is also not necessarily up to AMD. Maybe they're actually trying to work in a third partner. They're actually trying to work in something with Valve as well, and to have a go-to Steam OS edition,
like ASUS did, which would align with what they did with the Go OS with the Steam edition. You're right. Bang.
So and in that, and if they were planning that, then that announcement has to come from all parties, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe that's something that they're going to try and do, because it seems like for the Go S, not that many people are that interested in the Windows variant, but essentially this thing being, your Steam Deck Pro or maybe even your pseudo Steam Deck 2, even if you're not Joe, this, the Legion Go S Steam OS edition seems to be pretty popular out of those SKUs is what I would say. Yeah. So thank you everyone for tuning in for our wild speculations and our wishes and hopes, and hopefully not to crush our dreams. Make sure you do subscribe and follow along, leave us a comment, and that way you will definitely not crush our dreams. Thank you to these gentlemen for your expert analysis and for joining me in wearing a tinfoil hat.
Oh, anytime.
Cheers, everyone. You can do the dance off now. Lenovo has left the room. ASUS is back.
She's been milking me.
All right.